Good evening and welcome to the Archer Football Podcast. This is the NCAA College Edition. I'm your girl, Cleveland Kate. I am here alone for right now. Sonia and Michelle will be joining me. They are both traversing the highways to get home from work. I think they both had really long days. Better safe than sorry. I said, no doing the show from your car, no talking on the phone while you're driving. If you're listening to me right now and driving, that's fine. If you're watching while you're driving, we need to have a conversation because that's not safe. But I want to welcome you to this week's upsetting edition of the College Football Podcast. It was a crazy weekend in NCAA football. We saw some huge upsets. We're going to look through all of those. We can talk about how the rankings have changed. And then we're going to get in a little in-depth talk into the game of the week that you voted on our poll last week was Michigan versus Washington, a rematch of last year's national championship. Went a little bit differently this year and is part of our upset craziness. But first, want to kind of catch you all up on where we're at with the Heisman Trophy candidates this year. I think top spot is still Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State, had an insane game this week against Utah. That they won handily. Utah State. Sorry, they won handily. He just looked really good. Cam Ward from the U is also looking really good. He's quarterback. He's in our number 2 spot. And Travis Hunter from Colorado, he kind of had an off week, but he's still probably the best player in football. We will find out as the season goes on. So those are the top 3 that we're kind of keeping an eye on. I love the fact that only one of them is a quarterback. Hey, Camden, how you doing? We have a running back, we have a quarterback, and we have a wide receiver / corner, which is just one of my favorite things. I love a kid that can play both sides of the ball and can do it really well. And that's what Travis Hunter brings with his game. Can't wait to see some more from these 3 gentlemen this season, see how this shakes out. Quarterback Ewers out of Texas is still in the conversation, but as long as Arch Manning's playing and he's not, it's hard for me to keep him in my top 3. So we're going to let him go. If you happen to be watching us on the Twitter or the Facebook, we love that. But you can't really talk and interact with me or Sonia and Michelle when they get here. If you jump up to our YouTube channel, like Camden, you can chat with us. And then look, I can put your comments on the screen. We can answer your questions. I'm going to use you as a guinea pig. We can see how it goes. This week, the upsets were fast and furious and all over the place. I think the biggest one has to have been Alabama losing to Vanderbilt. I know everyone's been talking about it for the last 2 days. They lost 35-40. They had just jumped up to number 1 as a result of the Tide beating Georgia and beating them handily. And then to play this poorly against Vanderbilt. I know that I want to give Vanderbilt all the credit. They played a stellar game. They did everything they needed to do. Alabama made mistakes. They took advantage of them. It's the first time in school history that they've beaten a top 5 SEC team. So it is just all unicorns and sunshine and rainbows if you are a Vanderbilt fan right now. Those are some bragging rights that you're going to be able to have forever while Alabama is trying to figure out what happened. As a result, they dropped in the rankings down to number 7. And it's interesting to me now that we've entered week 7 of the season, how the coaches poll and the AP polls have kind of lined up. We had some controversy at 1 and 2 the first few weeks. And now Texas, number 1, Ohio State, number 2, Oregon, number 3. And then we get a little bit of Penn State, Georgia, Penn State, Miami in 6th, Alabama in 7th. Tennessee's in 8th in the top AP poll and 9 in the coaches poll. And frankly, I think that's a little bit generous. When we talk about the upsets that went on this weekend, Tennessee is one of the ones that we have to talk about. Number 4, formerly number 4 Tennessee, lost 19-14 to an unranked Arkansas team. Again, it's one of those games where these underdogs get so riled up and motivated to play as well as they can. It's like their Super Bowl or their playoffs or whatever you want to call it. And Arkansas came to play, and they manhandled that defense, manhandled Tennessee in that loss. When I look at some of the other games, you've got Alabama losing, Tennessee losing. The U handled their business, but barely. The U beat Cal 39-38. That's a 1 point. I think that's why they didn't really move in the rankings. They won while all these other teams were losing, but they won by a point. And then Southern Cal losing to Minnesota 17-24. It's interesting because the week before we had watched Minnesota do Michigan and almost beat them. It was a 3-point game. And so I figured they would come to play and it would be a good game. Didn't know if I'd gave them enough to win, but they didn't need any help for me to win. They got it done. So those were just some of the big upsets this weekend. And I think Alabama being the first biggest, but really Michigan losing to Washington to me is the story of the week. You've got this game that was the national championship game last year, and both teams lost their head coaches, lost a lot of their star players, their quarterbacks to the NFL and those kind of things. So they're both trying to figure out who they are and rebuilding. And I think Washington really used this game as a way to make a statement to say, we're not that far away from the team that went to the championship game last year, whereas Michigan is still trying to figure out who they are. They had two very close games, 3-point wins over Minnesota and USC. And so they've been kind of showing that they've got some weak spots and the ability to beat them. And Washington took advantage of all of that this week. From a statistics perspective, Michigan only had 17 first downs. Washington had 23. Michigan rushed for 174 yards, which is very good for them. They want to play that ground game. They want to control the clock. The problem is Washington was able to put up 315 yards in the air. If your defense is going to give up 300 yards in the air, that's you're not going to win a lot of games with those kind of issues going on. Total offense, 287 to 429. It was just a train wreck from that perspective. Michigan had 5 penalties. Washington only had 2. Michigan lost a fumble. Washington had no turnovers. They didn't, ball security is again important. Third down conversions are a big deal. Washington was able to convert 5 out of 11 attempts, whereas Michigan only got 4 of 12. But Michigan did do 1 fourth down conversion, and they got there, which is, I guess it makes up from one of the third downs they didn't get. They went ahead and went for it on 4th time. I still really think that they are struggling with their identity. They're not sure who they are, who they want to be, what they want you to think of when you think of Michigan football. It's not what we've seen in the past. And the Big Ten itself is really changing with the influx of all these new teams this year, with the Pac-12 going away and all of these new teams coming in. It's really changing Big Ten football. But we've got a lot of other Big Ten teams that are sitting in the rankings. Like I said, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Iowa State, Indiana is still. I don't know when Indiana is going to get some credit. They are 6-0, right? And I know I'm the first person to tell you that Indiana is a basketball school. It's not a football school, but they have done some really nice things this year, obviously, because they're winning. And they took it to Northwestern this weekend, 41-24. It was just that one was a brutal one. They had 380 passing yards while giving up 243. They had 150 rushing yards, giving up 100. It's like total offense. They had over 500 yards, which is such a change for an Indiana team. They're usually not able to do that. So, hey, Michelle, just talking about the Big Ten in general, Indiana's getting no respect at 6-0, sitting down there at the bottom of the rankings. They're down at 18. Illinois is at 23 at 4-1. There's a lot of one-loss teams above Indiana. What do they need to do to get respect, to get past a Utah or a Boise State that have Texas A&M? These one-loss teams when they're a perfect 6-0.
Well, I mean, they probably have to beat someone who the voters respect. And so right now they don't respect their conference at all. So they have to beat someone outside of the conference, someone in the SEC or conference like that. That'll give them a little respect, just a little. It may not get them what they want, but it'll get them just a little respect. So all they want is a little RESPECT.
RESPECT.
There you go.
I think they're off this week. I
The,
don't see
the
a
beauty
game
of
for
it
them.
now, though, is that we have more teams that can get into the playoffs. So you have these
Yeah.
1-win teams. You win your you win your conference and stuff like that, and hey, you get in. They're gonna let more teams in. So hopefully, some of these, smaller. I won't say smaller schools, but the conferences that are less respected
Yep.
can get some additional people in and show what they're worth. Now it hasn't worked out too well when some of these teams have made it to the playoffs and then they get in there and not necessarily show us. But we'll see. I'm so excited about the playoffs and the fact that there are more teams. So I love the fact that the poll keeps moving, because of course, the first 3 games are probably like preseason game, or like that's the games right there where they can decide where we're going to move and who looks good and who doesn't look good. Even though most of them are not playing against great competition, but there are a few here and there that play some games where you can see, okay, this is the team they had last year. They lost players or they have the same players and they still look good. So I love the movement.
Yeah. When I look at the rankings, so ultimately they rank 25. With the new playoff system, all that matters is 12. So everybody's trying to get into that top 12 to get a playoff spot. 6 of those 12 teams in the top 12 are undefeated. The other 6 have 1 loss. You've got a BYU at 5-0, Indiana at 6-0, Pittsburgh at 5-0. Like if those teams continue to win, what's the U sitting at? The U sitting at 6-0 and they're 6th. They're still behind a 4-1 Georgia. That 1 loss to Alabama, I feel like looks even worse now that Alabama's lost to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, well, but Alabama can lose 2 and they'll still be up in there. So it just depends.
Yeah.
It just depends. We've seen them make it when there were just 4 teams with 2 losses, or maybe.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep. So, if you're a BYU, an Indiana, an Illinois fan, a Pittsburgh fan, I mean, never fear. You've got time. You don't have to get to the top. You just got to get up into the 12. So if you're 18, you just got to get 6 spots up.
In the words of my favorite slogan, just win, baby.
Just win, baby.
Just win, baby.
I think that's what a lot of the coaches are telling these kids, especially it's week 7, but it's still early in their season.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is what you can do, right? You worry about this weekend. You worry about the opponent on the schedule. You win your games, and then you sit back and whatever happens, happens. So a lot of shakeup in the rankings this week, but they're a lot more closely aligned in the AP versus the coaches poll. They seem to agree now on like 1 through 6. So we'll see after another couple weeks if they continue that track. Big Red checking in. I pray Ole Miss doesn't get any more mysterious injuries this week. Child, no kidding. No kidding. And then he says Notre Dame shouldn't get in if they don't join a conference. So here's the nice thing about this new format for anyone who's not familiar with it. The only way to get a bye is to win your conference. And if you're not in a conference, you don't get to win a conference. You never had a chance at a bye. So while Notre Dame can get into the playoffs, they don't have a chance at a bye. And that's about the only way I could see that they could come up with trying to motivate these teams that are not in a conference to join one. You really can't force them. They've proven that the money is too good to collect it all themselves they get all that bowl money themselves. In the Big Ten, that all goes into a kitty and gets shared among all of the teams in that conference. From a money standpoint, it's going to be hard to convince them. You're going to have to do it the way they're doing it, which is if you want to buy, you need to get into a conference. And
there are other teams, and then there's Notre Dame, and the institution of Notre Dame. We're talking about a program who had their own TV deal with NBC that only show their games on TV. So, and that's national TV. I don't think Notre Dame football doesn't believe that they have to get in a conference, and nothing that I've seen over this last decade or so tells me that they need to get into a conference. We want them to because it's not fair, but I don't think they think that they have to, and because they're all their other programs are in the conference, just football is not. So And I think they intend to let it stay that way. The only way they do it if they don't make the playoff system. Maybe that might make them. Maybe, just maybe.
Maybe. Camden checking in. So it's a pay to enter playoff system. Not pay to enter, but you got to join a conference if you want to buy. The top 4 teams, the top 4 ranked teams that are conference champions get a bye. So it doesn't have to be 1 through 4. It could be 1, 3, 6, and 10. If that's where, if you have a bunch of SEC teams and a bunch of Big Ten teams in there, it's only the conference champion that gets a bye. So they're hoping that'll motivate teams like Notre Dame, or you still got those 2 little sad teams alone in the Pac-12. Theoretically, they're not ranked, but theoretically, one of them could end up in there and get a bye if they win their conference championship.
Well, the one thing we can all agree on is that no matter how many teams are in this playoff, we're not all going to be happy. And I can tell you, they're going to be tons. Half of those teams are going to be from the SEC, so everybody might as well get used to it.
Yeah, I heard those comments. We won't have another thing like you did with, was it UCF or Florida State last year, who the game in 5 and didn't get in. And I'm like, no, you're not. It's going to be the team at 13 who's going to complain that they're not getting in. There's always going to be a team on the bubble, but I think at least 12 gives more teams the opportunity to get in there. Once you're in, anything can happen, right? It doesn't matter anymore. And I think the last few years with just 4 teams, the difference between 1 and 4 was just too big. And so 4 was getting their butt kicked, 3 was getting their butt kicked, and it just ended up being 1 and 2. It kind of felt pointless. I think with this many teams, it'll be very interesting to see. I'm looking forward to the playoffs. I talked a little bit about the Heisman race while you were out. I think it's still Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise, Travis Hunter, the wide receiver corner from Colorado, and Cam, the quarterback from Miami. I think they're still the 3 front runners for the Heisman. Jeanty had an off week this week, but he's still so much better than any other running back in the nation right now that I think he's okay. If they really want a quarterback, Cam's still looking good. But I know you and I are big fans of Travis.
I mean, I've stated where I am, and if I had a vote, I said that some time ago that's where my vote is going, and it's nothing is changing that. So unless he gets hurt and can't finish the season, other than that, I don't see it.
Yeah, Big Reds. What if you get a non-Power 5 school in the playoff? What about it? They can't get a bye unless they win their conference. If they win their conference and they're one of the top 4 conference champions in rankings, it's all good. It's all good. No worries at all. So yeah, no surprises in the ranking other than I thought Alabama, frankly, would drop down past 7, and I thought Georgia would drop down a little bit, but I think Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon have it right. We'll find out soon enough. I think Ohio State's got Oregon on their schedule here real quick, so that will settle any debate about 2 or 3. Want to get your thoughts, Michelle? Did you see the Michigan-Washington game?
I saw some of it. I did. I saw some of it.
A lot of mistakes, I thought, for Michigan, and I thought they're still struggling to figure out who they are.
Offensively,
both of those teams are so close in, they were in the championship last year. They both lost their head coaches. They both lost quite a few players, quarterbacks, to the NFL. They're trying to figure out who they are, and I feel like Washington has a better grasp on who they are than Michigan at this point.
Yeah, and we talked about Michigan a couple of weeks ago, and they may not find their identity this early. I mean, again, they lost a lot of players. They won a national championship last year. They have several in the NFL. They lost their coach. They got a first-year coach. I mean, there are a lot of things going on. It's not the program that won the championship. So, they're still figuring out, and maybe this is their identity. Maybe what we're seeing, this is who they are. So, they want to run the ball. They only completed like 18 passes in the game.
Yeah.
So,
they had 113 passing yards to 174 rushing yards. Like, they're very good at
only
rushing
18 passing attempts. And so, they want to, they want to play great defense, they want to run the ball, and they need the quarterback, to control the game. And so, they're going to lose some here and there, and they probably just going to need another recruiting class too as well. So we'll see how it goes.
They need some help in that secondary. They gave up over 300 yards in the air to Washington. You can't give up 300 yards in the air if you want to win games, unless you're putting up 4.
Right. I was about to say, unless you're putting up more than that. So
right. Big Red, I'm not even putting your comment on the screen. Ohio State is not going to get cooked by Oregon. The Buckeyes are going to cook the Ducks. Don't even try to get into middle of my homerness with your Oregon love over there. We got Spencer Rattler starting in New Orleans this week. It'll be very interesting. I love rookie NFL quarterbacks that were like in the bottom of the college draft class last year to see how they shine, because I think some of them will do better than we expected. You know what I'm saying? So I'm excited to see that. So yeah, that was just my biggest takeaway, is that their defense needs work. They need to stop the passing game. And then the penalties, 5 penalties for 40 yards and way too many punts. They only converted 4 times out of 12 on third down.
It's hard to watch. It's sometimes hard to watch, but I know if you're a Michigan fan, you're trying to see. Who are we and what do we have? Where are we going to go? And this is not going to be their year. So unless something happens now, there's still some time. So you never know. They can go on and win.
Well, I think at this point, their mission and their focus is really not the playoffs. It's beating Ohio State for the 4th year in a row. That would give them, if they can do it, the lift they need. And I have told anyone who will listen to me, if Michigan beats Ohio State for the 4th year in a row, I'll be down in Columbus helping Ryan Day pack his bags. Because you can't be my head football coach and not beat Michigan 4 years in a row. I'm not having it. How'd the U do this week? I know you won.
That's the only thing.
That was a 1-point game, though, right? Against Cal, 1 point.
Yeah, I tried to stay up for it. I did my best. The game started at 10:30, but I saw the parts that I needed to. I always seem to wake up when these games are at the end and they're about to, make a big play to win the game. But I saw a lot of it. I think I just dozed off in between. But yeah, Cam finds a way. They find a way. They've been starting slow in the last couple of weeks, but they find a way. After they come back out, the second half is their game. They come back out and they're a whole different team. It's almost like he wakes up and he gets that offense going in the second half, and they're fun to watch. I'm enjoying it. I'm not overly confident, but I'm enjoying it.
Any big upsets this weekend that really kind of made you laugh or smile? Well,
I'm not an Alabama fan, so everybody knows that when they lose, I'm always happy. But so that probably was the best thing that I saw, and it was funny because that game was going on, and then the South Carolina game, Tennessee lost. Tennessee and Arkansas, all those games were going on around the same time, and all these upsets, and I was so excited because I'm such an upset person. I love upsets. It's the best. That's the greatest thing about college football is me watching upsets. So everybody that was upset, I was excited, and I was going for the underdogs. Except for California, I wasn't going for them.
I wasn't surprised when Minnesota beat Southern Cal, because Minnesota has been playing really tough all year and some really close games. So I was more surprised by Tennessee losing to Arkansas, by Tennessee only being able to put up 14 points. I was just like, wow, that's some defense.
It was a good one too. It really was a good one. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I liked Texas A&M coming in at 25 in the rankings, beating up on number 9 Missouri 41-10. Again, it wasn't even what happened to Missouri's defense.
It was non-existent. Not there at all.
Yeah. Yep.
It was like, wow. And then someone had a sign. I think they said overrated or something. It was, I love when they show the signs that the college students make. And the whole crowd started chanting overrated, So it was hilarious, and I think I tweeted. I think I tweeted with that I love college football just with that post. So yeah, it wasn't a good look for Missouri, but wow. I mean, I thought it was going to be a better game than that, and it from the start it was just like.
Yeah, I feel like this is a game Missouri needed to lose in week 2 because I don't think they were aware of all the problems in their game that Texas A&M took advantage of and highlighted. And I think in week 2, they could have made corrections and changed that. And now we're just too far into the season. I don't know if they can bounce back from this, if they're good enough to bounce back from this. Yes, they took them to the woodshed.
The
But
thing
Big Red
about the
says,
SEC though is they beat up on each other. You know those
they
teams.
do.
They beat up on each other. I mean, you have those top 2. So you
Yeah.
have, you have the Georgias and the Alabamas, and then sometimes LSU, and the rest of them they kind of just beat up on each other. And
Yeah,
so
Clemson's trying to hold on, but I just don't know. With Michigan losing so much, who's the top dog in the Big Ten? So I'm going to say Ohio State. You could argue Oregon. When I look at just the Big Ten standings in conference, Indiana's at the top of the list at 3-0. They've played one more game than Ohio State and Oregon. Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State are all 2-0 in the conference. They are all undefeated at home, obviously undefeated away. So it's going to come down to the schedule and when they play each other and we see what happens. I still think Ohio State and Oregon are both better than Indiana. I think they're both better than Penn State. I talk a big game about how confident I am that Ohio State will beat Oregon, but I don't know that because Oregon, the Ducks are very talented. I think whoever wins that game may have a shot at the national title.
Or and I have Oregon.
Conference.
I have Oregon as my top team in the Big Ten.
Yep.
They're fun to watch. They put up good numbers. They were one of my Pac-12 favorites last year. But again, they're going to have to prove that, and the only way you prove that you're the top dog in the Big Ten is that you have to beat Ohio State. And so if they can do that, I don't think there's any stopping them once they do that.
Well, and I think that's one of the things for me that's actually nice is they play each other this Saturday at 7:30. So I hate it when it comes down to the end of the year and people have to vote on rankings between two teams in the same conference that didn't play each other. They play each other. Settle it on the field. Whoever votes for who, it doesn't matter. Settle it on the field. Whoever wins that game, I think, is going to end up being the Big Ten champ and will play for a national championship.
And we'll play for the national championship. And oh boy, I can't wait for this game. I cannot wait for this game.
We should just make that our game of the week without having to do a poll. There are some interesting.
Well, we can't do that, Kate.
All right. So we're going to wrap things up. Michelle, thanks for joining me and chatting a little bit here on Upset Week. So many upsets this week. I love it. I wish I could vote so that I could have thrown some votes for these teams that did well with the upsets. As usual on Thursday, today's Wednesday, so Thursday tomorrow, if you look for us on Twitter at OTFB Football, you will find our poll. We're going to say goodbye to y'all, and then Michelle and I are going to sit down and look at the schedule this week. We're going to pick 4 games that we think are interesting, and we will put them on the poll and let you vote. And maybe you'll pick Ohio State, Oregon. Maybe you'll pick one of the other great games that are on the lineup for this weekend. But that's kind of the cool thing about college football. The NFL's dealing with bye weeks now, and so there aren't as many. And then there's London games. College football is a little bit Friday and all day Saturday. It's whatever time zone you're in, there will be a good game on for you to watch. So on behalf of us ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See